Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question's to the Premier. Premier, today we debate legislation that will deliver a suite of strong protections for commercial tenants, legislation the Greens will support. We recognise this state has moved to freeze evictions and rent increases for residential tenants, in part due to the advocacy of the Greens, but they will be substantially less protected than business people leasing commercial premises. Premier, why are business operators being prioritised over everyday Tasmanians in rental homes, many of whom have lost work or had their hours cut? You've received 2 pieces of correspondence now from the Tenants Union, TasCos, Community Legal Centres Tasmania, Anglicare and Shelter about the disparity between commercial and residential tenancy protections during this pandemic. Premier, will you move to ensure Tasmanians living in rental homes receive the same level of support and protection as commercial tenants during this pandemic?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member for that question, the Leader of the Greens, and her interest in this matter, which, if I could make this point in terms of the way that this Parliament has progressed over the last, broadly speaking, 8 weeks, I think it's the concerns in terms of ensuring that we have fair and reasonable outcomes for all people has been shared across the chamber. And I do note your constant advocacy on this particular issue and the phone calls that we've had as well. Could I just say, without repeating some of what was in the question, it is worthwhile just making the point that we did move early in terms of protecting residential tenants that were affected, like many people, by the impacts and unprecedented challenges of COVID-19. There was a halt placed on rental evictions, restrictions on inspections as well to ensure that appropriate social distancing could be maintained, and that was something that was done earlier. And there was also a ban on rental increases during the emergency period. I must say I don't think that the right place for further protections for residential tenants is in the commercial bill, as I indicated to you recently. And the other point that I would make as well is that until I actually stood up yesterday and said that I haven't received a lot of correspondence, I hadn't received a lot of correspondence, but I did receive some overnight in terms of this matter. But I'd have to say, but again, it wasn't hundreds, and it was a relatively contained number. If I'd received more than 20, I'd be surprised, but from both landlords and tenants, both in the commercial space and in the residential space. So I'm not certain how wide the impact is on residential tenants in terms of the effect, because on one hand, it would be fair to say that we have those tenants that are on low incomes or receiving job seeker have actually received an increase in income. There are many casual or part-time employees that are now receiving JobKeeper, and in some cases they've received an increase in income. But there will be those that fall through the gaps, and I acknowledge, as I did this morning with you, that we may have overseas students or visa holders that are in difficult circumstances. We may have sectors of the middle class that are in difficult circumstances because they might have suffered a significant drop in income. So whilst there have, at this stage, again, I understand the issue that has been raised. I'm not certain that placing it within the commercial tenancy bill. However, what I am happy to do is to seek further information from Ben Bartle, to have a discussion with the Residential Tenancy Commissioner as well. And if we need to establish a fund that where somebody has been severely impacted as a result of COVID and is in a difficult position so that we can find a fair and reasonable outcome, I'm happy to go down that path. And I'd give a commitment to the Parliament today to take those steps. I think that one concept, though, that has to be, I think, understood here for both landlords and tenants is that we are in extraordinary circumstances, very difficult circumstances, and whilst, and I note some of the Facebook traffic last night, it appears that there, certainly in some quarters, may not be a great deal of goodwill. I would say this, that we need to try to find ways that we can work together to actually get to an outcome that acknowledges the very desperate circumstances that we're in, and find ways that we're not going to unfairly have people punished, whether they be a landlord or a tenant, as we work our way through this. But what it will mean is that everybody, to some degree, will have to play their part. And I'll just circle back to the commercial tenancy legislation. For landlords and tenants, what we would hope is that they could arrive at an outcome that, whilst may not be all that attractive to them, suits their purposes, and that is that once we get through this, a landlord will have a good tenant in place and a tenant won't have lost their business as a result of what we're doing. And by what we're doing, having closed them down, and the public health impact that has occurred. But banks need to play their part, and in many cases they are, but it's only a deferral of either capital or interest repayments. The state government will need to play its part, and to date we've provided significant support across the board, not just to businesses but to individuals as well. And as I've said, I'll make a commitment today that we would engage and look to come up with, if necessary, a fund for residential tenants that could be utilised for those that are in extreme distress, and work our way through that. But in the same way that local government has played its part, the state government has, local government needs to play its part as well. And whilst many councils have hardship policies in place, I think it's incumbent upon everybody that has a lever to pull here that they play their part, accept that we are in difficult circumstances, and look for a way through this so that when we do come out the other side, that fair, reasonable and just outcomes have been arrived at, but importantly, that we can continue to move forward both as a society and as an economy.